The vibrant, crystalline spires of Xylos pierced the perpetually twilight sky, a breathtaking testament to an alien civilization's impossible architectural prowess. Below, the city hummed with a million lives, a symphony of exotic languages and the rhythmic pulse of countless grav vehicles weaving through iridescent avenues. But tucked away in a quiet, dimly lit room, far from the city's throbbing heart, the only sound was the soft, rhythmic whir of a makeshift life support unit and the gentle rustle of fabric. Here, a human woman, Elara, knelt beside a small, fragile alien form. The air was thick with unspoken tension, a palpable fear for the tiny being, yet also a profound, unwavering current of deep care that transcended species. Elara was a xenolinguist, her academic pursuits having once focused on the intricate nuances of Xylosian dialects. Her past also held a quiet history as a medical technician, a skill set she had believed long dormant until now. She had chosen Xylos for a new life, an expatriate seeking solace and perhaps anonymity after unspoken events on her homeworld. Living a modest existence in the lower districts, Elara was known locally for her quiet determination and an empathy that seemed to stretch beyond the usual human capacity. She blended into the sprawling alien metropolis, an unassuming figure, yet within her small dwelling, she was anything but. It began with a chance encounter in the shadowed alleys where the city's dazzling light failed to reach. A small, crumpled form, abandoned and gravely ill, barely clinging to life. Young Kale, a Xylosian child, no older than 4 cycles, had been left for dead amidst the refuse. His unique bioluminescent markings, typically a vibrant display of health and emotion for his kind, were now dull, flickering weakly, like dying embers. Elara, with her medical eye, immediately recognized the severity. The local traditional healers, steeped in ancient practices, were entirely ill-equipped for Kale's specific affliction, mistaking it for a common, treatable fever. The mainstream Xylosian medical system, a bureaucratic labyrinth built on strict social hierarchies, was wholly inaccessible to a child of Kale's apparent social standing, or lack thereof. He was simply beneath their consideration. Elara couldn't turn away. Her conscience, honed by years of quiet observation and an inherent sense of justice, demanded action. She carefully, gently, carried the feverish child back to her humble apartment, transforming her living space into a sterile, if rudimentary, infirmary. This alien child, discarded by his own kind, now rested under the watchful, compassionate gaze of a human stranger. The city outside continued its bustling rhythm, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding within Elara's walls, a silent battle for a life that society deemed worthless. This act of quiet defiance, of profound human compassion in the face of indifference, was just the beginning. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of human compassion in the cosmos. Elara wasted no time, immediately setting up her small apartment as a makeshift infirmary. Every available surface became a workstation, carefully sterilized and organized with the few medical supplies she had salvaged from her previous life as a tech. She meticulously cleaned Kale, her hands surprisingly gentle as she worked on his delicate alien skin. His unique physiology, a complex blend of chitinous plates and soft, bioluminescent tissue, presented a challenge, but her xenolinguistics background had always included extensive study of Xylosian biology to facilitate more accurate communication. She consulted her datapad, cross-referencing known Xylosian biological markers with human medical principles, attempting to translate symptoms and potential treatments across species. Days blurred into nights as she battled the unknown disease gripping the tiny alien. The fever persisted, sometimes spiking dangerously high, causing Kale's faint light to dim even further, threatening to extinguish completely. Her human methods, a stark contrast to the traditional Xylosian herbal remedies and chants, drew suspicion from some of her Xylosian neighbors. Whispers, easily picked up by Elara's trained ears, spoke of her strange human ways, and the unnatural mixture she concocted. A few bold individuals even subtly warned her against interfering with destiny, hinting at a caste system that dictated who was worthy of care. Their thinly veiled xenophobia was a constant, low-level hum of resistance, but Elara ignored it, her focus entirely on Kale. The real obstacle, however, wasn't external prejudice, but the insidious, rapidly deteriorating health of the child himself. His illness was obscure, responding erratically to her initial treatments, a frustrating puzzle with life-or-death stakes. She understood the Zylosian medical establishment, a monolithic, bureaucratic entity deeply entrenched in tradition and rigid social stratification. Trying to approach them for help for an abandoned, low-caste child like Cale would be an exercise in futility, met with indifference, if not outright hostility, toward her, outsider, interventions. They valued protocol and ancient wisdom over empirical observation and rapid response, certainly over a human's improvised solutions. Elara endured sleepless nights, her eyes often red-rimmed from exhaustion, but her determination never wavered. She researched tirelessly, translating ancient Zylosian medical texts she had acquired during her academic days, looking for parallels, for any obscure reference that might shed light on Cale's unique affliction. She began to experiment, carefully blending human pharmaceutical compounds she had managed to acquire through discreet channels with traditional Zylosian remedies, creating novel concoctions in her makeshift lab. Every tiny change in Cale's condition was meticulously recorded: his fluctuating bioluminescence, his erratic breathing patterns, the subtle tremors that sometimes racked his small frame. Each observation was a data point, a clue in the complex biological mystery before her. Desperate for even limited assistance, Elara reached out to a few open-minded Zylosian academics she had collaborated with in the past, under the guise of an abstract, theoretical research project. She described Cale's symptoms in vague, generalized terms, careful not to reveal the true nature of her patient or her human involvement. Their insights were sparse, mostly confirming the extreme rarity of such symptoms, but even a fragment of information was a lifeline. The flickering hope fueled her, pushing her onward as Cale's frail life hung by a thread, his small, alien body fighting a silent, desperate battle. Cale's condition now worsened dramatically, his small alien body succumbing further to the relentless disease. He drifted between consciousness and a terrifying delirium, his faint cries barely audible above his labored breathing. His fever spiked dangerously high, turning his normally cool skin unnervingly warm to Elara's touch. The unique bioluminescent markings, once a subtle, shifting tapestry on his skin, now seemed to dim ominously, the once vibrant blues and greens fading to a weak, almost colorless pallor. A sense of dread settled in Elara's stomach. She recognized these signs, the subtle tremors, the decreased waste elimination, the strange mottling of his skin. These were clear indicators of organ failure, a race against time that she was rapidly losing. The prognosis, even for a human child with access to advanced medical care, would be grim. For Cale, in her humble apartment, it felt like an insurmountable challenge. A cold, icy fear gripped Elara, a terror she hadn't felt since her own world's tragedies. She had poured every ounce of her knowledge, every moment of her waking life into Cale's care, but it wasn't enough. Desperation began to gnaw at her, driving her to extreme measures. Her personal savings, painstakingly accrued over years of modest living on Zylos, dwindled rapidly as she exhaustively sought out rare Zylosian flora rumored to possess potent medicinal properties. These were not the common herbs of the market, but highly sought after, often illegal, ingredients. She ventured into the dangerous, unregulated markets of the city's underbelly, places where the glow of bioluminescence was often eclipsed by the sinister shadows of illicit trade. The stench of exotic spices mingled with something less savory, the air thick with unspoken threats. Risking her own safety, navigating the labyrinthine stalls and the wary, often hostile eyes of the vendors, she haggled for tiny packets of shimmering dusts and dried, otherworldly plants, each purchase a gamble against Cale's fading life. Each acquisition cost her not just money, but a piece of her own security. With every sleepless night and every frantic search, her emotional connection to the silent, suffering child deepened. He was no longer just a patient, he was a fragile flicker of hope, a testament to her own enduring humanity in a cold, indifferent universe. His tiny, weak hand, when it occasionally sought hers during a moment of semi-consciousness, sent a jolt of fierce protectiveness through her. She felt like his only anchor, his last chance against the encroaching darkness. She would exhaust every possibility, every resource, every fiber of her being, before she allowed that small, precious light to finally extinguish. Just as her focus narrowed intensely on Cale's deteriorating state, an unsettling presence began to manifest around her dwelling. It started subtly, a shadow lingering a moment too long at the street corner, a specific pattern of grav vehicle passing by with unusual frequency, the faint, almost imperceptible hum of advanced surveillance technology. Elara, honed by years of living on the fringes and a natural perceptiveness, noticed. She initially dismissed it as local curiosity or perhaps the lingering xenophobia of her neighbors, but the pattern became too consistent, too precise. She recognized the hallmarks of professional observation. Agents, she concluded, moving with a calculated, almost imperceptible menace, were watching her. Their presence was a silent, chilling question mark, hinting at a hidden connection to Cale or perhaps the obscure disease ravaging his young body. Who were they? And what did they want with Elara and the dying alien child she so fiercely protected? The mystery only deepened the precariousness of her situation. A flicker, barely perceptible, brought Elara's weary eyes back into sharp focus. After administering a new, meticulously prepared combination of extracts derived from one of the rare Xylosian flora and a synthesized human antibiotic, Cale's erratic breathing seemed to stabilize, just for a moment. His bioluminescent markings, though still terribly dim, pulsed with a faint, ephemeral blue, a fleeting echo of their former brilliance. It was transient, lasting only a few agonizing minutes before the irregular rhythm returned, and the blue receded into the familiar pallor. Yet that tiny flicker, that brief respite from the relentless decline, was a profound jolt, a spark of hope that reignited her fading resolve. It wasn't a cure, not yet, but it proved she was on the right track. There was something in her concoction that Cale's unique biology responded to. This minute improvement, however short-lived, underscored the immense complexity of his disease, hinting at a multifaceted affliction that required a precise, intricate solution, far beyond any simple remedy. She wouldn't give up. Driven by this fragile glimmer of progress, Elara intensified her research, fueled by an almost manic determination. She delved deeper into the ancient Xylosian medical texts she had managed to acquire, their archaic script and obscure references now becoming her singular obsession. Hours melted into days as she deciphered cryptic passages, cross-referencing symbols and pictograms that spoke of mythical ailments and lost cures. Her linguistic skills, once purely academic, became her most potent weapon. And then, buried within a crumbling holographic scroll detailing forgotten Xylosian healing rituals, she found it. References to a dimming sickness, an affliction mirroring Cale's symptoms with terrifying accuracy, a disease once thought to be mythical, purged from history by empirical Xylosian science. The text, steeped in poetic Xylosian metaphor, hinted at a rare, specific planetary mineral, described as the solidified breath of the ancient world, as its only known antidote. The discovery was electrifying, a monumental breakthrough that sent shivers down her spine, but it immediately presented a daunting moral dilemma. This mineral, according to her deciphered texts and her broader knowledge of Xylosian culture, was not just rare, it was deeply ingrained in Xylosian tradition, considered sacred, almost sentient. It was used in high caste rituals and imperial ceremonies, a symbol of longevity and power. Acquiring even a small sample of it was virtually impossible for a non-Xylosian, let alone one without specific imperial clearances. It was culturally protected, legally restricted, and militantly guarded. To even attempt to obtain it would mean not only breaking Xylosian law but also potentially desecrating their most revered traditions. Elara paced her small apartment, the conflicting thoughts warring within her. On one hand, the law, the cultural sensitivities, the very real danger of imprisonment, or worse for defying the Xylosian authorities. On the other, Cale's fading bioluminescence, his shallow, fragile breaths, his desperate need. His life was hanging by a thread, and this mineral, this ancient, forbidden substance, was his only hope. Could she stand by and let him die, knowing a cure existed, simply because of laws and cultural barriers? The moral weight pressed down on her, an unbearable burden. But as she looked at the small form, flickering weakly on her makeshift medical cot, the choice became agonizingly clear. Laws were constructs, life was absolute. She would find a way to get that mineral, no matter the cost. The surveillance around her dwelling, still subtly present, now felt less like a threat and more like an added layer of complexity to her impending, desperate mission. She had to be invisible, silent, and successful. Cale's survival depended on it. Elara knew a direct approach was suicide, both for her freedom and Cale's last chance. She formulated a daring plan, meticulously calculating every step. Her deep understanding of Xylosian culture, a lifetime's academic pursuit, would be her shield, and her linguistic fluency her weapon. The first step was invisibility. She spent hours researching the intricate caste distinctions, the subtle sartorial cues, the specific dialects spoken in the lower echelons of society. She practiced the inflections, the deferential postures, the nuanced slang of the city's underclass. Her goal, to impersonate a low caste Xylosian, someone unremarkable, easily overlooked, yet capable of navigating the city's fringes without drawing undue attention. This wasn't just about blending in visually. It was about thinking, speaking, and moving like one of them. Her disguise was a masterpiece of careful observation and ingenuity. She scavenged discarded biomaterials, fashioning them into drab, utilitarian garments that mimicked the worn, functional attire of the mining districts. She applied a natural, dust-like pigment to her skin, subtly altering her human features to appear less distinct, less foreign. Her hair, usually neatly tied back, was pulled into a rough, practical braid, and a hooded cloak completed the transformation, obscuring her face and frame. The tension was a living thing in her gut, a knot of adrenaline and fear, but beneath it thrummed a fierce determination. She wasn't doing this for herself. Under the cloak of the artificial Xylosian night, she slipped out, a ghost in her own city. Her destination, a restricted mining zone on the distant fringes, an area notoriously difficult to access. She moved with a calculated gait, avoiding direct eye contact, her ears finely tuned to the rhythmic thrum of the mining operations and the chatter of the Xylosian patrols. The air grew thicker with mineral dust and the metallic scent of excavated rock as she ventured deeper into the industrial sector. Every shadow held a potential threat, every sudden noise a possible discovery. She used her knowledge of Xylosian social strata to her advantage, mimicking the subservient politeness expected of a low-caste worker, offering brief, mumbled apologies if she inadvertently brushed against a higher-caste Xylosian or a patrolling guard. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the relentless thrum of the machinery. She found herself in a labyrinth of towering conveyor belts and cavernous excavation sites, the air thick with mineral dust and the echoing clang of heavy machinery. The target mineral, described in the ancient texts, had a distinctive, ethereal glow even in its raw form. She scanned the freshly excavated rock faces, her eyes piercing the gloom, searching for that telltale shimmer. Just as she spotted a faint, luminous vein embedded in a wall of crystalline rock, the piercing beam of a patrol's searchlight swept across her position. Elara froze, her breath catching in her throat, her entire body rigid with fear. 3 Xylosian guards, their armored forms imposing, their weapons at the ready, were moving directly towards her. Her mind raced, sifting through every contingency, every cultural nuance she had ever studied. She quickly lowered her head, adopting the submissive posture of a low-caste worker caught where they shouldn't be, projecting an aura of bewildered humility. As they approached, their multi-jointed legs clicking on the metal grating, she mumbled a hurried, almost unintelligible apology in a deep regional dialect, claiming to be lost and disoriented, seeking shelter from the city's crowded thoroughfares. One of the guards, their bioluminescent eyes narrowing, stepped closer. "What are you doing here, citizen? This zone is restricted," the guard demanded, their voice a low, resonant growl. Elara kept her head down, her hands clasped tightly before her, playing the part of a terrified, illiterate drone. She spoke of being new to the city, confused by the vastness, seeking an old, non-existent relative among the mining workers. Her story, a concoction of plausible desperation and vague details, was barely coherent, but it tapped into the Xylosian societal expectation of humility from the underclass. The guard, clearly annoyed by her perceived ignorance and lack of threat, waved a dismissive hand. "Get out of here before you cause trouble. Back to the lower levels. Now." He nudged her roughly with the butt of his weapon. Elara bowed deeply, mumbling thanks, and scurried away, her heart still pounding like a trapped bird. But as she retreated, her hand deftly scraped a small, glowing shard from the rock face. Later, safe within the anonymity of the lower districts, she examined her prize. It was small, no bigger than her thumb, but it pulsed with a soft, inner light. Precious. She had secured the sample. The next, and most critical, phase could begin. Back in her hidden infirmary, the small, glowing shard of mineral felt impossibly heavy in Elara's hand. It was the key, the final piece in a puzzle she had dedicated her life to solving, but also a potent, unknown variable. The process of turning this raw, sacred element into a usable medicine for a unique alien physiology was fraught with peril, a delicate dance between ancient Xylosian lore and cutting-edge human biochemistry. Elara meticulously sterilized the small, crystalline mortar and pestle, her movements precise and deliberate. She began to grind the mineral, its ethereal glow intensifying under the pressure, releasing a subtle, earthy scent she hadn't anticipated. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered, a paradox of fragility and immense power. She carefully measured out her own synthesized compounds, a cocktail of anti-inflammatories, cellular regenerators, and biostabilizers adapted from her extensive research into Xylosian biology. The air in the cramped infirmary grew thick with a faint, luminous mist as the mineral powder mingled with her sterile solutions. She worked with bated breath, every muscle in her body tensed, her mind a whirling vortex of calculations and contingencies. The proportions had to be exact, the dilution precise, the very method of combination critical. Too much and it could be toxic, too little, and it would be useless. She thought of Cale's fading light, his shallow breathing, the silent plea in his eyes from earlier, and her resolve hardened. This wasn't merely an experiment, it was a desperate act of faith. Holding her breath, she gently stirred the concoction, watching as the liquid swirled with its own faint, internal luminescence, shimmering like liquid starlight. As the final drop was prepared, a moment of profound doubt seized her, a cold, creeping fear that threatened to overwhelm her hard-won determination. This was Cale's last chance, a desperate gamble she had stolen and concocted. What if she was wrong? What if her interpretation of the ancient texts was flawed, her understanding of Xylosian physiology incomplete? The weight of his fragile life pressed down on her, an unbearable burden. She looked at the small, fading alien child on the cot, his bioluminescent markings barely visible beneath his skin, his breath a faint whisper. Could she truly administer this experimental, dangerous concoction? Her hands trembled, poised above the syringe. Just then, as if sensing her internal struggle, Cale weakly stirred. His tiny, three-fingered hand, translucent and frail, slowly lifted from the makeshift blanket and extended towards her. His eyes, though still clouded with fever, were open, gazing at her with an innocent, unwavering trust. There was no fear, no judgment, only a silent, profound acceptance. It was a gesture that shattered her hesitation, solidifying her resolve. This wasn't about doubt, it was about hope, about a promise she had made to a child forgotten by his own world. Her resolve, momentarily wavering, now hardened, forged in the crucible of his trust. With a deep, shuddering breath, Elara steadied her hand. She carefully drew the glowing, ethereal liquid into the sterile syringe, its light pulsing faintly in the dim room. Her gaze met Cale's, and she offered him a small, reassuring smile, a silent promise that she would not fail him. Gently, precisely, she administered the cure, watching as the shimmering liquid flowed into his tiny, alien veins. The waiting period that followed was agonizing, stretching into an eternity. The silence in the room was broken only by Kale's shallow, almost imperceptible breathing and the rhythmic, electronic hum of her life support equipment, each pulse a reminder of the delicate balance between life and death. Elara sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his brow, praying for a miracle. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour a lifetime. The fate of this small, alien child, and perhaps much more, hung suspended in the fragile balance of that quiet, desperate night. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, a change began to manifest in Kale. Elara, her senses heightened by exhaustion and anxiety, leaned closer, straining to catch every nuance. His shallow breaths, which had been so frightfully ragged and faint, now seemed to deepen, drawing a more substantial measure of air into his tiny lungs. Her heart, a frantic drumbeat for so long, hitched in her chest. She watched, motionless, for another sign, a confirmation that her desperate gamble hadn't been in vain. And then it came. A faint, renewed shimmer began to pulse beneath Kale's translucent skin. His bioluminescent markings, previously dull and lifeless, now pulsed with an ethereal, nascent light, a pale blue at first, then weaving with a fragile green. It was a faint glow, nothing like the vibrant display of a healthy Xylosian child, but it was there, undeniable. Elara felt a wave of profound relief wash over her, so potent it threatened to buckle her knees. She continued to monitor him with bated breath, her eyes never leaving his small form, searching for any regression, any hint that this was merely a temporary reprieve. But the breathing deepened further, the light strengthened infinitesimally, holding steady. He was improving. A choked sob escaped her lips, a sound she hadn't realized she was holding back. The physical and emotional toll of the preceding weeks, the sleepless nights, the relentless research, the constant fear for Kale's life, it all coalesced into an overwhelming wave. Her shoulders slumped, and she almost collapsed onto the floor beside his makeshift bed, exhaustion threatening to consume her entirely. But she couldn't, not yet. He still needed her vigilance. She allowed herself a few precious moments to press her forehead against the cool, smooth surface of the cot, inhaling the faint, sweet scent of Kale's recovering bioluminescence. The scent of life. It was a victory, small in the grand scheme of the universe, but monumental in her tiny, illuminated room. As Kale drifted into a more natural, restorative sleep, his breathing even and his light steadily regaining its faint strength, Elara found herself with a rare moment of quiet. Her gaze fell upon the faded, threadbare garments he had been wearing when she found him. They were simple, almost crude, indicating a life of neglect and poverty. Yet something about them nagged at her. With gentle hands she picked up a small piece of fabric, a remnant of his tunic, carefully examining the stitching. The material was coarse, but the weave, she now noticed, was surprisingly intricate in certain areas, almost too fine for the quality of the cloth itself. Her fingers traced a particular pattern, barely visible in the dim light. It was small, no bigger than her thumbnail, intricately carved and then carefully stitched into the fabric of his tunic, almost as an afterthought, yet clearly deliberate. As her eyes adjusted, and she recognized the stylized curves and interlocking lines, a sudden chill snaked down her spine. It was a symbol, unmistakable in its ancient elegance. A crest. Not just any crest, but the distinctive emblem of a powerful, ancient Xylosian noble house, one known for its deep roots in the imperial lineage. The shock of the discovery hit her with the force of a physical blow. This didn't make sense. Everything about Kale's appearance, his abandoned state, his poverty, screamed of the lowest caste, of a forgotten child. Yet, this symbol, carefully sewn into his clothing, contradicted every assumption she had made. It was incongruous, unsettling. Noble houses did not abandon their children, especially not their heirs, let alone allow them to succumb to illness in the squalor of the lower city. The presence of this crest implied a hidden connection, a secret that cast Kale's entire history into a starkly different, far more complex light. This was no mere forgotten child. This was a child whose abandonment, whose illness, was steeped in a mystery far deeper and potentially far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The subtle observation she'd been under, the menacing shadows, suddenly took on a new, ominous meaning. Cale was not just a patient, he was a pawn in a game she barely understood. The crest, so subtly hidden yet so undeniably present on Cale's faded tunic, instantly sparked Alara's deep-seated suspicions, transforming her focus from medical care to an urgent, covert investigation. The image of that noble house's symbol, once a distant academic curiosity, now burned in her mind, a stark contradiction to everything she had assumed about the abandoned, ailing child. Cale's apparent status as a forgotten waif in the city's underbelly clashed violently with the emblem of one of Xylos's most ancient and powerful lineages. This wasn't merely a misplaced family heirloom. It spoke of deliberate concealment, a calculated masquerade designed to obscure his true identity, and the real reason for his abandonment. She realized, with a chilling certainty, that there was far more to his illness and her finding him than she had initially comprehended. The simple act of compassion had drawn her into a complex web of Xylosian power, politics, and ancient secrets. Her small apartment, once a haven of healing, now felt like a clandestine intelligence hub. Alara resolved to uncover the truth, knowing that Cale's continued safety, and perhaps her own, depended on it. She couldn't risk direct inquiry, any overt questioning about a noble house, especially one shrouded in such mystery, would draw unwanted attention and compromise her already precarious position. So, she turned to her network, a labyrinthine web of contacts meticulously built during her academic career. These were not government officials or public figures, but rather scholars, archivists, and fringe historians, individuals with a quiet thirst for knowledge, often operating on the periphery of accepted Xylosian academia, much like herself. She spun a plausible, yet entirely fabricated, tale of researching obscure historical lineages, leveraging her long-standing reputation as a xenolinguist with a penchant for unraveling ancient mysteries. Navigating encrypted Xylosian data networks, she used her specialized linguistics software to sift through centuries of public records, private correspondences, and scholarly debates. The Xylosian archives were vast and meticulously maintained, but also heavily censored, especially concerning noble houses. She searched for any mention of the crest, looking for anomalies, for gaps in the official narratives. Her searches were precise, almost surgical, designed to extract fragments of information without triggering any alarms in the ever-watchful Imperial dataspheres. Days blurred into nights once more, but this time, her exhaustion was not just from tending to Cale, but from the relentless mental strain of deciphering veiled truths. Piece by painstaking piece, the fragments began to coalesce, forming a grim mosaic. The noble house, whose crest Cale wore, had indeed faced a catastrophic event, not widely publicized but whispered in the more obscure historical commentaries. It wasn't war or political intrigue, but a mysterious plague that had recently decimated its members. The disease, distinct from any common Xylosian ailments, had been kept under an impenetrable veil of secrecy. It caused a gradual dimming of the bioluminescent markings, mirroring Cale's symptoms precisely, leading to organ failure and eventually, a quiet, horrifying death. It was a family-specific affliction, an inherited genetic vulnerability that manifested as a unique illness. The noble house, fearing widespread panic, political instability, and the tarnishing of their ancient lineage, had gone to extraordinary lengths to suppress any information about the plague, framing the deaths as unfortunate accidents or natural causes. The revelation struck Alara with a cold, hard certainty. Cale's unique illness, the very one she had so desperately struggled to cure, wasn't just some random, obscure malady. It was a variation of this very family-specific affliction, a genetic time bomb passed down through generations. And Cale, the small, innocent child she had pulled from the streets, was the last known survivor of that once distinguished, now almost extinct, noble line. His abandonment, therefore, was not merely neglect, it was a desperate, horrific act of concealment, a last-ditch effort to hide the shame and potential danger of their inherited sickness from the wider Xylosian society. He had been left to die, not out of malice, but out of a terrifying, self-preserving need for secrecy. The implications of this discovery rippled through her mind, vast and terrifying. The implications of this discovery rippled through her mind, vast and terrifying. Elara realized with a sinking feeling that Cale's illness, and more critically, his recovery, was not merely a personal triumph over a rare disease. It was a potential geopolitical earthquake waiting to happen. If this family-specific affliction, carefully suppressed and hidden for generations, were to somehow spread beyond the confines of the noble house, or if the genetic vulnerability that caused it were more common than believed, it could ignite widespread panic across the Xylosian population. The cure she had painstakingly developed, a blend of human and Xylosian medicine, held the potential to save countless lives, but its very existence threatened to expose the imperial family's deepest, most guarded secret, a secret they had literally allowed their own to die to protect. She understood the Emperor, the highest authority on Xylos, would hardly welcome the news that an outsider, a human no less, had not only uncovered a millennia-old imperial shame but also held the key to a potential pandemic. This knowledge weighed heavily on Elara, transforming her private sanctuary into a moral battleground. She considered the consequences of silence, of returning Cale to anonymity, perhaps placing him in a safe, hidden location. She could protect him, allow him to live a quiet life, his noble heritage forever buried. But then what? What about the cure? Withholding it, knowing its potential to save lives, felt like a betrayal of her own ethical code, a negation of every medical principle she held dear. Moreover, Cale, as the last survivor of his line, held immense political significance, whether he knew it or not. His very existence was a threat to the carefully constructed narrative of the noble house and, by extension, the stability of the Xylosian Empire. He could never truly be safe while his identity remained a secret, yet known to so few. Elara knew she could not keep Cale's recovery a secret, not only for his immediate safety from those who might wish him silenced, but for the greater good of Xylos. The cure had to be made universally available, or at the very least, presented to the proper authorities for widespread dissemination and research. This meant revealing herself and Cale to powerful, potentially dangerous forces, the very individuals who had observed her dwelling, who had allowed this child to be abandoned, perhaps even sanctioned his demise. It was a perilous path, one that could lead to imprisonment, execution, or worse, the suppression of her findings and the loss of Cale's life. But the alternative, a clandestine existence haunted by what-ifs, was simply not an option for her. She had saved him, now she had to protect the truth, no matter the personal cost. As these weighty decisions churned in Elara's mind, a soft rustle from the cot drew her attention. Cale, deeply asleep for what felt like an eternity, stirred. His small, three-fingered hand twitched, and his eyelids, once heavy and shadowed, fluttered open. His eyes, now bright with a clear, vibrant luminescence, scanned the room, no longer clouded by fever or delirium. A soft, contented sigh escaped his lips, and his bioluminescent markings, once a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer, now pulsed with a strong, healthy rhythm, a kaleidoscope of blues, greens, and purples dancing across his skin. He looked at Elara, his gaze clear and innocent, a silent gratitude radiating from his small form. He reached out, his hand instinctively finding hers, and squeezed gently. Unaware of the political storm brewing around him, of the imperial secrets his small body carried, Cale smiled. It was a pure, unadulterated expression of joy and well-being, untainted by the sinister machinations of the adult world. He was a child reborn, a beacon of health and life, a testament to Elara's unwavering dedication. His vibrant bioluminescence filled the small room with a soft, otherworldly glow, chasing away the shadows of doubt and fear that had plagued Elara for so long. She looked at his bright, innocent face, and a fresh wave of determination surged through her. She had healed him, brought him back from the brink. Now, she would ensure his future, and the future of countless others, by bringing the truth to light, no matter how uncomfortable or dangerous that truth might be for the powerful. The time for hiding was over. She would face whatever came next, Cale's small hand in hers, ready to confront the Xylosian Empire itself. The Xylosian agents, those subtle shadows Alara had observed lingering around her dwelling for what felt like an eternity, finally made their move. There was no crash of doors, no shouted commands, none of the aggressive force she had half expected given the magnitude of the secrets she now held. Instead, their approach was cautious, almost deferential. A single grav vehicle, sleek and silent, shimmered to a halt outside her window. The door hissed open, and two figures, tall and regal in their dark, flowing robes, emerged. Their bioluminescence, usually kept subdued in public, pulsed with an almost imperceptible authority. They did not breach her threshold immediately, but rather paused, their three-fingered hands clasped formally before them, their posture radiating an ancient, unwavering respect. One of them, taller than the other, stepped forward and activated a small, glowing device, projecting a holographic image of himself facing her window. His voice, modulated and calm, resonated subtly through the quiet space, carrying an undeniable weight of imperial decree. Alara of Earth, and the child Kael. The projection intoned, its eyes, though holographic, seeming to pierce through her defenses. We come bearing an imperial summons. Alara's heart gave a sudden, hard lurch, a mixture of validation and dread washing over her. So they knew. They had known all along, watching, waiting. The secrecy around Kael's illness, the clandestine abandonment, all of it. Despite the calm demeanor of the agents, the underlying current of power was palpable, an invisible force pulling her into a world far beyond her humble apartment. The summons was not an invitation, it was a command, requesting her immediate presence, along with Kael, at the Imperial Palace. The urgency in the envoy's voice, though carefully controlled, implied that delay was not an option, that the Emperor himself awaited them. It carried an undeniable weight of authority, a call that could not be ignored without severe repercussions. A mixture of fear, cold and sharp, and a steely determination solidified within Alara. This was it. The moment of confrontation she had anticipated yet dreaded. She looked down at Kael, whose bright eyes followed the holographic projection with innocent curiosity, completely unaware of the immense power now bearing down upon their small world. He still held her hand, his squeeze a comforting anchor to her tumultuous thoughts. She knew the summons could lead to anything. On one hand, it could be accolades, recognition for her medical breakthrough, a new era of interspecies cooperation. On the other hand, it could be imprisonment for interfering in imperial affairs, for exposing a hidden truth, for daring to touch the sacred. The Xylosian Empire possessed a nuanced, often brutal, sense of justice. Alara took a deep, steadying breath, grounding herself in the present. There was no turning back now. She had made her choice the moment she decided to save Kael, the moment she deciphered the crest, the moment she decided to expose the truth. She gently squeezed Kael's hand, offering him a reassuring smile that belied the turmoil within her. Kael, she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. We have an important journey to make. We're going to meet some very important people. She began to gather a few essential items for him, a clean wrap, a small nutrient paste, a vial of her precious cure, just in case. She prepared him for the journey, speaking in calm, soft tones, explaining that they would be going somewhere far away, a place of great beauty and power. Her movements were deliberate, each action a silent affirmation of her commitment, not just to the child beside her, but to the truth she carried. She knew that this confrontation with the Emperor was a gamble, a plunge into the heart of Xylosian power, but she would not go unprepared. She would face it head on, her humanity her only shield, her compassion her only weapon. The grav vehicle that arrived for Alara and Kael was nothing like the utilitarian transport she had expected. It was a marvel of Xylosian engineering, shimmering with subdued bioluminescence, its elegant lines hinting at both power and grace. As she settled Kael onto the plush, contoured seating, the silence within its cabin was absolute, insulated from the bustling sounds of the alien metropolis outside. Through the panoramic viewport, the city stretched into the distance, a dazzling tapestry of crystalline spires and intricate grav lanes, now seemingly rushing past them with impossible speed. The contrast between her humble, almost forgotten dwelling in the opulent, silently gliding palace transport was overwhelming, a stark visual representation of the chasm she was about to cross. Cale, nestled securely beside her, gazed out with wide, curious eyes, occasionally pointing a small, luminescent finger at a particularly vibrant section of the cityscape. Elara offered him a reassuring touch, her own apprehension masked by a focused resolve. The journey was short but felt interminable. They ascended through layers of the city, leaving the lower districts far below, eventually reaching the highest spires, where the very air seemed cleaner, imbued with an ancient serenity. The vehicle finally docked with a barely perceptible hum, and the doors glided open, revealing a retinue of cloaked Xylosian officials waiting in solemn silence. Their expressions were unreadable, a blend of formality and intense curiosity. Elara took Cale's hand, a silent promise of protection, and stepped out into the imperial palace. The palace interior was a breathtaking display of Xylosian artistry and imperial power, a living testament to centuries of tradition and advanced technology. The walls pulsed with intricate bioluminescent patterns, shifting and flowing like liquid light, depicting ancient myths and genealogical charts of noble houses. The air was thick with the scent of rare, exotic flora, and the hushed echoes of soft, resonant chimes. Ancient artifacts, some seemingly predating recorded history, were displayed on pedestals crafted from glowing, sentient crystal, each radiating an aura of profound significance. The sheer scale and opulence were designed to inspire awe, and perhaps a healthy dose of intimidation. Elara, however, kept her gaze steady, her focus unwavering. She was not here as a tourist. They were led through a labyrinth of grand corridors, each more majestic than the last, their footsteps muted by the plush, bioluminescent carpeting. Finally, they arrived at a vast, circular chamber, its central area dominated by a low, intricately carved dais. Arrayed around it were high-ranking Xylosian officials, their robes richly embroidered, their bioluminescence a vibrant display of their status. Among them, Elara recognized the distinctive markings of the imperial head healer, his form rigid and his expression severe. As she and Cale were presented, a hush fell over the room. The officials scrutinized her with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled suspicion. Their multifaceted eyes, accustomed to the subtle political dances of the court, bore into her, dissecting her human form, her modest attire, the small, glowing child clinging to her side. There were whispers, low and guttural, about her presence, her foreignness, her audacity in breaching these sacred halls. The imperial head healer, his voice deep and resonant, was the first to speak. His tone was laced with a barely concealed disdain. "Human," he began, every syllable a challenge. "You claim to have cured a Xylosian affliction. A disease our most learned diagnosticians deemed incurable. Explain your methods. Explain your motives. For such claims, if unfounded, carry severe consequences." His gaze was piercing, an attempt to intimidate, to unnerve. Elara met his stare, her resolve hardening. She knew this was not just about medicine, it was about pride, power, and the deeply ingrained resistance to outside intervention. She would not falter. She was ready to defend her actions, her science, and Cale's life. The heavy, ornate doors of the chamber, crafted from a seamless, living metal that pulsed with a faint inner light, swung open with an almost imperceptible sigh. All whispers ceased, every head turned, every eye fixed on the entrance. The air, already thick with expectation, grew impossibly dense, charged with an ancient, palpable power. Into this profound silence, the Xylosian emperor entered. He was a figure of immense presence, his form taller and broader than any Elara had yet encountered, clad in robes of deep imperial violet that shimmered with an intricate, almost hypnotic bioluminescent pattern. His multifaceted eyes, usually piercing and unyielding, were etched with a silent sorrow, a profound wisdom that spoke of centuries of weight borne upon his shoulders. He moved with a measured, deliberate grace that belied his imposing stature, a living embodiment of ancient power and modern responsibility. This was the pinnacle of Xylosian authority, a being whose lineage stretched back to the very foundations of their civilization. Cale, nestled close to Alara, seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere, his small hand tightening its grip on hers. The Emperor's regal gaze swept across the assembled officials, brushing over the head healer's rigid form, before finally coming to rest upon Cale. It was as if all other beings in the vast chamber simply ceased to exist for him in that moment. A flicker of raw, unrestrained emotion, so brief it might have been imagined, crossed his otherwise stoic features, a flash of pain, of recognition, of an almost unbearable vulnerability. It was a glimpse into the heart of a ruler rarely exposed. He took a slow, deliberate step, then another, his footsteps echoing softly in the cavernous space as he approached the makeshift medical cot where Cale rested beside Alara. The other officials parted before him, their own bioluminescence dimming in deference, their expressions a mixture of shock and bewildered awe. To Alara's utter astonishment, and to the visible consternation of the assembled court, the Emperor did not stand aloof, issuing pronouncements. Instead, with a gesture of profound humility that left the entire chamber breathless, he slowly knelt beside Cale's bed. His grand imperial robes fanned out around him on the polished floor, a stark contrast to the small, simple cot. His massive, multi-jointed hand, usually adorned with rings of office and symbols of power, reached out gently, tentatively, to Cale's small, still glowing form. It was a gesture of personal connection, intimate and deeply moving, entirely unexpected from such an august figure. He spoke, his voice a low, resonant rumble that carried effortlessly through the hushed chamber, not to Alara or the officials, but directly to Cale, a soft, almost reverent murmur in their ancient tongue. The Emperor then turned his gaze, now filled with a mixture of immense relief and profound gratitude, towards Alara. The silent sorrow in his eyes intensified as he began to speak, his words a heavy admission that silenced any remaining dissent in the chamber. He revealed that Cale was not merely of a noble house, but his own last surviving direct descendant, the only hope for the continuation of his royal line. The dimming sickness, the family blight that Alara had uncovered, had indeed claimed every other member of his immediate family, leaving only Cale. He confessed to the agonizing decision, forced upon him by tradition and the desperate need to maintain imperial stability, to conceal the truth of Cale's illness and his abandonment after his royal physicians, the very ones standing in this room, had declared the child beyond any hope of recovery. He expressed a deep, heartfelt gratitude for Alara's intervention, for her impossible feat, for defying all expectations and bringing his last kin, his family's future, back from the brink of death. His voice, though regal, now carried the raw emotion of a father, an emperor, humbled and eternally thankful. The Emperor still knelt beside Cale's bed, his voice now a low, mournful rumble that reverberated through the stunned chamber, began to explain the agonizing decision that had led to Cale's abandonment. His words painted a vivid, heartbreaking picture of an empire teetering on the brink of widespread panic, a societal structure fragile beneath its grand facade. He spoke of the Great Dimming, as his family privately called it, a hereditary illness that had silently, mercilessly, ravaged his direct lineage for generations, each death carefully masked, each loss a further threat to the imperial line's perceived invincibility. The decimation of his immediate family before Cale's birth had been catastrophic, leaving only the young prince as the last hope. When Cale, too, succumbed to the faint symptoms of the dimming sickness, the imperial physicians, steeped in traditional Xylosian medicine, had declared his condition terminal, an inevitable progression to a quiet, agonizing end. To prevent the revelation of a weakened imperial line, a revelation that could have triggered political instability, secession attempts from distant provinces, or even a full-scale civil war, the Emperor had made the impossible choice. He had allowed Cale to be discreetly removed from the palace, to be left in the lower districts, effectively abandoned to a fate he believed was sealed. It was, he confessed, a desperate, last-ditch effort to preserve the integrity of the Xylosian Empire, a terrible burden of leadership he had carried in silent anguish. He admitted, with profound regret, that his own medical experts, bound by ancient texts and rigid protocols, had simply given up hope, resigned to the will of fate. The shame of their helplessness, coupled with the political imperative, had led to Cale's quiet exile and presumed death. Alara listened to the Emperor's confession, her heart heavy with the weight of his sacrifice and the terrible choices one must make in positions of ultimate power. When he finished, the silence in the chamber was deafening, punctuated only by the soft, rhythmic pulses of Cale's newly vibrant bioluminescence. Alara, stepping forward with quiet dignity, acknowledged the Emperor's pain but candidly explained her own actions. She spoke not of political maneuvering or imperial decree, but of a universal human imperative, the humanitarian desire to save a child's life, regardless of species or social standing. She detailed her unique blend of human and Xylosian medical knowledge, the painstaking research, the synthesis of ancient texts and modern science, and the sheer audacity of her attempts. She advocated fiercely for open communication, for a future where medical knowledge transcended species boundaries, where the sharing of ideas and methodologies could prevent such tragedies from ever recurring. Her voice, though soft, carried the conviction of undeniable truth, of empirical success where tradition had failed. She wasn't challenging his authority. She was offering a path forward, a new paradigm for healing. The Emperor listened intently, his multifaceted eyes fixed on her, absorbing every word, every nuance of her impassioned plea. As Alara finished speaking, a palpable shift occurred in the chamber. The initial suspicion from the head healer and the other officials had slowly morphed into respect, then grudging admiration, and finally, a profound sense of awe. They had witnessed not only an impossible medical feat, but a moral courage that transcended their own rigid societal norms. The Emperor rose slowly, his gaze still holding Alara's, a new light dawning in his ancient eyes. He saw not just a human, an outsider, but a force for good, a visionary whose compassion had not only saved his lineage but held the key to a brighter future for all Xylos. With a gesture that encompassed both Alara and the future of his empire, the Emperor offered her a position of unparalleled influence within the Xylosian medical research community. It was an unprecedented offer, a seismic shift in imperial policy, a formal acknowledgement of humanity's invaluable contribution. Alara, he pronounced, his voice resonating with renewed hope. You have shown us what fear concealed. You have brought light where there was only dimness. We invite you to stay, to build, to lead. Let us forge a new era of interspecies collaboration, where knowledge is shared freely, and healing knows no boundaries. It was an alliance born from despair and nurtured by compassion, a promise of a future where Xylos and humanity could stand together, bridging the vast chasm between their worlds for the betterment of all sentient life. The Emperor, having witnessed firsthand Alara's remarkable compassion and unparalleled medical prowess, wasted no time in solidifying his commitment to this new, interspecies alliance. Within days of Cale's miraculous recovery, a formal imperial decree was broadcast across all Xylosian media channels, echoing through the crystal spires and into every corner of the empire. The decree publicly announced not only Cale's astonishing return from the brink of death but, more importantly, hailed Alara's vital, indeed singular, role in this medical triumph. He spoke eloquently of her scientific acumen and, perhaps even more powerfully, of her boundless empathy, qualities that transcended cultural divides and nationalistic pride. He made it clear that Alara, a human of Earth, had achieved what the most esteemed Xylosian physicians could not. The decree didn't stop there. In a move that shocked many traditionalists, the Emperor established a new, groundbreaking interspecies medical institute. This institute, unprecedented in Xylosian history, was dedicated to the research and treatment of rare diseases, with a specific mandate to explore the synergy between Xylosian and human medical sciences. With an almost revolutionary flourish, he then formally appointed Alara as its inaugural director, placing her at the helm of this monumental undertaking. It was a clear, undeniable signal to his people and to the wider galactic community that Xylos was entering a new era of openness and collaboration, an era directly born from Alara's solitary act of kindness. The Xylosian populace, initially wary of the human outsider who had penetrated the hallowed halls of their imperial court, quickly shifted its collective perspective. The emotional weight of the Emperor's public humility, His candid admission of the imperial family's secret struggles, and his eloquent tribute to Alara's visible compassion, resonated deeply. Images of the emperor kneeling by Cale's bedside, followed by heartfelt pronouncements recognizing Alara's brilliance, flooded every data screen and Neuralink. Her actions, initially viewed with suspicion, now inspired a new wave of respect and appreciation for human ingenuity, empathy, and the profound capacity for healing that existed beyond their own species. The story of the human who saved the last Xylosian prince became a popular narrative, a testament to the unexpected connections that could form across the vastness of space. For Alara, this new chapter was not about personal glory or political power. She had never sought fame, having left her homeworld precisely to escape the spotlight. Her new purpose, however, resonated with every fiber of her being. She dedicated herself entirely to her role as director, not for the accolades, but for the fundamental betterment of all sentient life. Her institute quickly became a beacon of hope, drawing in brilliant minds from both Xylos and beyond, fostering an environment of open inquiry and shared knowledge. She championed the belief that disease knew no species, boundaries, and neither should its cure. Under her tireless leadership, the institute began to flourish, becoming a symbol of understanding and healing across the stars. Cale, now fully recovered and thriving under Alara's attentive eye, became more than just the last heir. He became a powerful, living symbol of hope, a tangible representation of what could be achieved when compassion superseded prejudice, and when knowledge was shared freely. His renewed bioluminescence, vibrant and strong, pulsed not just with life, but with the promise of a future where Xylos and humanity walked hand in hand, united by a shared dedication to health and progress. Alara, once a quiet xenolinguist, had found her true calling, her quiet determination now echoing across an entire empire. Cale thrived under Alara's continued care, his small, luminescent body growing stronger with each passing cycle. His laughter, once a foreign sound Alara had only imagined, now echoed frequently through the palace gardens, a testament to his renewed health and the secure, loving environment she had cultivated around him. He wasn't just the last prince, he was a joyful, curious child, whose vibrant bioluminescence symbolized the renewed hope of the Xylosian Empire. Alara, true to her nature, remained his constant, grounding presence, ensuring his physical well-being and nurturing his bright, inquisitive mind. She had saved his life, and now she was helping him truly live it. Alara's Institute, a sprawling complex of shimmering Xylosian architecture and cutting-edge human biotechnologies, flourished beyond all initial expectations. It became a beacon of interspecies medical advancement, drawing in the brightest minds from across the Xylosian star system and attracting human researchers eager to contribute to its groundbreaking work. Under her visionary leadership, the hidden royal illness, once a source of imperial shame and devastating loss, was thoroughly researched. Genetic mapping, impossible with traditional Xylosian methods, revealed the precise origins of the dimming sickness, allowing for the development of highly effective preventative measures and even a gene therapy protocol for future generations, ensuring that no Xylosian child would ever suffer Cale's fate again. The Institute didn't just cure, it innovated, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible in xenomedicine. Alara found a profound sense of belonging and purpose on Xylos, a depth of fulfillment she hadn't known was possible. The quiet, unspoken reasons for leaving her homeworld, the lingering shadows of a past she had sought to escape, finally receded. She had not only saved a single life, a small alien child, but in doing so, she had bridged a monumental cultural gap, demonstrating that compassion truly was a universal language. Her quiet act of defiance, her stubborn humanity in the face of indifference and ancient tradition, had not only ensured Cale's future but had irrevocably altered the destiny of an entire empire. It had solidified humanity's place in the galactic consciousness, not as conquerors or exploiters, but as a force for good, a species capable of profound empathy and scientific brilliance. One afternoon, many cycles after that fateful day in her humble apartment, Alara sat on a bench in the Imperial Gardens, a rare moment of quiet contemplation. The air was soft, filled with the gentle hum of Xylosian flora and the distant, melodic chimes of the palace. Kale, now a healthy, energetic young prince, his bioluminescence a dazzling kaleidoscope of joy, chased a shimmering native insect with youthful exuberance. He laughed, a sound that brought an inexplicable warmth to Alara's chest. She watched him, a contented smile gracing her lips, knowing that her long, arduous journey had led her precisely to where she was meant to be. This alien world, these alien people, had become her home, and in saving a single child, she had found her own salvation. Her life, once adrift, was now tethered to a purpose greater than herself, woven into the vibrant tapestry of a renewed empire. She was not just a human on Xylos, she was family. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more tales of human courage and compassion. Check out our next video where we explore the origins of the Xylosian Empire's ancient healing traditions.